Hello, I'm Meredith Blackwell, and this is Don Pfister, and we are here at the University of Florida campus for the annual Mycological Society of America meeting. And today is the 11th of July, 2022, and this is part of the oral history for Mycology project. And today we're going to interview our first person from Uruguay, who is a member of the Mycological Society of America. So we have a very, very international society that we're proud of. And Sophia, why don't you introduce yourself? Don.
I'm Don Pfister, and Meredith introduced me, and Sofia is here with us. You should give us your full name so I don't mess it up.
No worries. I'm Sofia Simeto. I'm from Uruguay, and I'm actually a PhD student at Blanchett Lab at the University of Minnesota.
Okay. And we'd just like you to tell us a little bit about where you were born, and was your family interested in biology or something about them, and how you got interested?
So I was born in Montevideo, which is the capital city of Uruguay. And since very little, I would say I was always attracted to outdoor activities. And actually, one of the main activities for my family during the summers was going to camping in a really pretty remote place where there's no infrastructure, but we actually love that place because of that. And we would spend like 3 weeks over there. So I had the chance to really be outside and explore, and I really liked everything related to biology, I would say.
Did you know fungi at that time?
So at that time, I was kind of afraid of them because my family would say, "Oh, those mother mushrooms, don't touch them, just in case." But I would be really attracted to the fact that one day there was nothing there, and the following day there were like a lot of mushrooms coming out from the soil, and that was something that caught my attention, I would say. And many years later, when I got into the university, I'm a biologist, so I was really into broad biology, I would say. And I had the chance to meet the fungi in some classes. Unfortunately, we don't have a mycology department there, so as I think it happens many places, I had to see the fungi and the whole fungal kingdom within a botany class.
I think many of us did that.
Yeah.
So, but then I got in contact with what that whole fungal kingdom was, and I got interested. And at that point, I decided to. So at the end of our career, we do like an internship, and we do like a small thesis to get the undergraduate. And I chose a mycology lab. So I would say the mycology lab at the university.
Which university was
it? It's the Universidad de la República. It's University of the Republic, and yeah, like similar to the college here, it will be like science faculty. And there, the mycology lab was led by a mycologist, and it actually is an Argentinian person, but was established in Uruguay for years. It's the name is Lina Betucci, and there I got really fascinated with it, and I started with a class which was actually about mycotoxins and contamination of food, and that class for me I really loved that class because it was 2 weeks, really intense, like 8 hours every day. But the whole first week was identifying fungi under the microscope. And that's where I think I got really caught into the liking the fungal kingdom as a whole.
Yeah, we're talking about how beautiful they are under the microscope. So
actually, I really enjoy, and at that point, we used to do pretty much a lot of microscope identification. So I remember spending like hours and drawing the structures, and by drawing those structures, then you really associate, at the end of the process, you associate the name of the species with the structures, and then you remember, and then you say, oh, this species, but this is not the type of conidia I was expecting, and all that. So I really still, although I, of course, use all the molecular tools, and I really appreciate that tools as having broadened the ability to identify, I still enjoy a lot microscope and spending hours there, yeah.
So after you got your undergraduate degree, Bob Blanchett, your advisor, had told me that you did work, and I don't know if you can, after your degree, you began to work for a group that's connected with the FAO, or was that later?
I had the chance to work, well, to participate on some training courses of FAO in my actual position. I do have actually I do have a position in a research institute in agricultural, the National Agricultural Research Institute in Uruguay, working in the forestry program as forest pathologist. But before that, I used to, when I was still working in that lab after getting my degree as an undergraduate, I worked mainly on endophytes of trees. And then I started a position, I got a position in this research institute and changed a little bit towards more the disease part of
So have they given you leave to come to Minnesota?
So right now, yeah, there was a mutual agreement that it was going to be beneficial for all parts for me to get a PhD degree. Yeah, and I came here and had the great chance to work with Bob Blanchett. So yeah, I'm really enjoying my time here, and it has been a great experience working in that lab.
So what's your project?
Actually, although I'm in the forest pathology lab, I'm working with insects, but fungi related with insects. So we wanted to, so there's this huge problem. I'm sure you all know about the emerald ash borer. So we wanted to know which fungi are associated with the insect and what's the role, which are those species. And we found three main functional guilds, like canker fungi, decay fungi, and entomopathogenic fungi. So I'm working mainly on the decay fungi associated with it, because those trees, once infected, get a rapid loss of wood strength that we think it's because of the fungi, the decay fungi, that we found some very aggressive pioneer colonizers. And the other part of the project I'm focusing on is the entomopathogenic fungi. So we got quite a nice collection of those fungi, and we are trying to see, and we are studying if we can use those to use as a biological control agent against the beetle.
We should mention that I knew Sofia before we got here. I didn't make the connection until she showed up today, but she was a participant in a workshop in Chile that I was involved with on wood decay, and it was in a little biological station near Puerto Montt in Chile. Do you remember, what's one of the most memorable things from that workshop for you? Do you have a particular memory? I'm just going to see if it's the same as one that I have that had nothing to do with the wood rot.
Well, maybe it's the same. So for me, well, I have several great memories about that class, but one of the highlights of that is when we did a small hike in the woods during the night, and we found this mycelium, bioluminescent mycelium, under the leaves, and for me that was the first time I saw that, and it was really magic, I would say.
Great, same thing that I thought you would say.
Yours too?
Yeah, well, I had never seen it quite like that.
I've never seen
We went out into the forest, and we had to go in far enough that none of the lights from the surroundings were there, and so you go in with a flashlight, and then you have to turn off your flashlight and kind of be there. But then just turning the leaf litter and moving the leaf litter, you got this luminescence.
It sounds
And
like
it was just amazing.
being in a boat and putting the water in
Well,
your
with
hand.
the dinoflagellates kind of thing. Yeah, well, this is not fleeting. You know, you turn it over and it remains.
Amazing.
And
I have never seen it.
But you should ask Bob, because he does for his own class. He produces this spawn with bioluminescent species. So especially this year, we had, so he puts like 30 students in a room. We were stay there in the darkness for our eyes to get used to. And then he reveals like a lot of bags and jars with the bioluminescence fungi. That's armillaria, but other species as well. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a mycelium.
Yeah, well, with
and
armillaria is one of the ones that you can grow pretty easily, and it produces rhizomorphs and so forth. That it's really quite ghostly.
It is.
So you see these finger-like things going out.
It's the whole mycelium glowing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You should ask Bob to show that.
It's just any armillaria, maybe.
Well, I'm not sure if there's a difference with it. You know, with we also get Panis stypticus, which is
the mycelium
interesting.
Or the
Mycelium.
Okay.
Fruit body mycelium, but
Oh.
Panis stypticus, there are luminescent and non-luminescent strains, which seem to be the same, but some of them are luminescent and some of them aren't. But again, you can have a Petri plate. They persist for quite a long time in the Petri plate as luminescent fungi.
Years ago, I isolated armillarias from Louisiana for someone who was doing a project.
You just
and
didn't
it
look at
never
them in the
occurred to
dark.
me. No, it never
You have
occurred
to
to
look
me.
at them in the dark.
But you have to really stay in the dark like for 10 or 15 minutes until your eyes get used to that, and then reveal the magic. It is amazing. And it's a perfect way to get someone that is not familiar with the fungi to get amazed, because it is really amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it was the same thing that that you thought about there. Yeah.
So, have you seen the wood that's rotted so that it becomes jelly-like? Was there any of it where you were? I think it's called. Oh, what is it called? Rotten wood in Spanish.
Oh yeah, we don't have that in Uruguay. That's the palo podrido. That I've never seen it personally. I know it happens in Chile, where I don't remember the species now, but there's a complete decomposition of the stumps, and then the cow and the cattle come and just feed on cellulose. Yeah.
Amazing. No chlorophyll needed.
Yeah. So I'm interested in your reflections on mycology in Uruguay.
Well, there's very, very qualified people, good researchers there. Of course, compared to, let's say, the US, the mycology there has not developed that much in terms of research, because sometimes it's kind of difficult to get grants to focus only in basic mycology. But anyway, at least there are several groups. There are really, really brilliant people there. And in my time at that mycology lab, we used to get grants for more applied research on diseases on commercial plantations and all that. But we, for example, in the same field trip, might stop on some natural forest to get endophyte sample for the studies for the endophytic community of native Myrtaceae, for example. So we kind of find our way to try to do more basic mycology.
We call it piggybacking.
Yeah. So yeah, but there are several groups. So for example, I'm in a really applied research institute, so I'm working mainly on forest diseases, which is great. And since those are mainly produced by fungi, I'm still connected with fungi and their research. And in that laboratory, the mycology lab, they would have studies on mycotoxins, but also, as I mentioned, endophytes. And well, there's one researcher, he's called Sebastián Martínez, and he was a mycologist since he was a child. And now he's also in the same research institute I am. And although his research is on rice disease, he still goes out to the forest and collect mushrooms and has published a lot of taxonomic works with Corticiaceae.
When you mentioned that you were looking at rot, the rot fungi associated with the Mycological, are they mostly ascomycetes or are some of them bacillus?
No, the ones we are working and we found to be really aggressive decomposers are all basidiomycetes.
That's what you would expect from rotters.
Yeah. So after there was a first part of the project, it was mainly like a biodiversity study to see what was associated with the galleries, and with the subset of strains of the decay fungi, we ran some decay trials to evaluate the decay potential. And first we did that on ash wood blocks, and then we did that the same in a microcosm setting. But then we set the same experiment with sapwood, like tiny discs of fresh branches of ash, and within 3 to 4 months, I would say, some of the strains, for example, there's a Trametes versicolor that you get nothing. Like, it's really spongy. The rest of the disc is really like the decay potential is huge.
Yeah, I guess my previous experience is with beetles that are associated with ascomycetes mostly. That's why. Yeah, although some of them do have basidiomycetes. So, do you teach? Are you on a research assistantship or?
I'm actually on a research assistantship. Yes. I have been TA in Bob's class, especially mainly in the laboratory sessions, helping him to set all those materials he has that are great. But mainly it's a research assistantship. Yeah.
I'm curious. Your English is quite good, and you're quite proficient.
No, it's very good. Good vocabulary.
How did you learn, or what's your experience there?
So my experience with English was, we do have English as a secondary language, like as an option for classes.
Starting what year?
Well, by my time back in the day, it was maybe in middle school or high school. Now they start early, as an option always, because we speak Spanish in Uruguay, that's the language. But then in getting into science, when I was an undergraduate, I was taking English classes, but then once you get into biological science especially, you have to read in English, you have to write in English, although the classes are in Spanish, like the communication is in English. So you get used to it, and you get maybe more proficient in technical vocabulary. Maybe if we have to talk about something else, I'm not proficient. But yeah, you get the vocabulary. Yeah.
My advisor, Dr. Oglesopoulos, was Greek, and he came back to the United States. He was born here, but went away until he was in junior high school. But when I knew him, he was in his 60s, and he still thought his numbers and his prayers still in Greek.
Sure.
And so I thought it was interesting. But everything else, and the scariest he was to ever give a seminar was when he had to go back to Greece to give a seminar because he didn't know common terms. It was okay for the science, but but the rest.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Well, you're very good.
I'm envious.
And,
I've always
you must
wanted
have a special talent.
Not really. It's like the actual experience of coming here and having to talk English like every day in everyday life. It's great for really reinforcing.
It doesn't give you a headache.
you learned.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you a headache. I've heard some people say, "Gave me a headache."
Yeah.
So, with your family, do they like what you do, or they understand it, or they wonder about it?
So when I decided to study biology, that was not that common by that time in Uruguay. I mean, there was a whole career on that, but you probably didn't know many people studying biology, or they would ask you, "Are you going to be a teacher?" I said, "No, I'm going to be a scientist." And that was pretty unusual in my family, but fortunately, my parents always supported all my decisions, the crazy ones also. So there I went to study biology, and yeah, maybe today it's more usual or it's more known about the biological science career. But yeah, I had no issues there. And
Now, your institute, is it in a university, or is it sponsored by the government, or?
my institute is sponsored by the government. So, but Uruguay is a small country, so we are quite few, I would say. And at the end, like if you go deep into very specific fields like forest pathology, like we are quite a few scientists studying and trying to solve problems. And so I really work a lot in collaborations with researchers at the university. And yeah, it's more like a network because that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So from time to time, I do help with some teaching at the university, mainly, for example, in the forest pathology classes, in the agronomy career, Yeah.
What forest diseases are there? Are there just polypore problems like Ganodermas or things like that, or?
Well, there are more. Actually, recently there was a published paper on Ganoderma species on the native forest. Mm-hmm. We, as a research institute, have to focus more on the productive section of it, and we focus mainly on commercial plantations. So I would love to go more into research to the native forest, but kind of have to focus on on commercial plantations. So we do have a little bit of everything, I would say. We do have foliar diseases that produce a lot of problems. The main plantations in Uruguay and many other Southern Hemisphere countries is for wood production and for pulp production is eucalyptus. So it's an exotic species, and as usual, at the beginning, maybe for the first 10 years, there were not that many problems. And then the natural enemies in the native range arrived, and we have a lot of work to do, I would say. So we have foliar diseases, we have some decay problems, we have very interesting, well, maybe you heard of myrtle rust, which is it's native to South America in our native Myrtaceae, and it made a host jump to the eucalyptus. And now it's spreading all over, unfortunately. And producing a lot of problems in where eucalyptus is. It's a lot of other Myrtaceae are native in New Zealand and Australia.
How long ago did the jump occur, do you think? Can you date it?
So the first detection of myrtle rust in Uruguay was in 1950 something, I don't remember now, when at that time there were no extensive plantations, but eucalyptus has been introduced at that time for like Huron as an ornamental. But the first detection anyway was on a native Myrtaceae. And the first report, official report of eucalyptus in Uruguay being infected by myrtle rust was maybe in 2001, but it has long before been there. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. No pine forests.
There are pine forests. It's also non-native, but we do have it as commercial plantation. But the most extensive areas are planted with eucalyptus. And interestingly, but the pine forest, there are pathogens as well. But the main problems, at least for now, in the pine plantations are mainly associated with insects, especially bark beetles. And it's like for eucalyptus, the main constraints in terms of productions are diseases caused by fungi. Some bacteria as well, but mainly fungi. Yeah.
So, or what bark beetles are they? They're not any of the ones that are in North America.
So there's one, there are three main, there are several species.
But they're native too.
Some are native, but some are introduced. And we have an European species, we have an Asian species that is making several problems. And the last time I heard, and I connected with them, nowadays there's a pretty huge problem with a native megaplatypus that is now attacking eucalyptus. And it's used to be restricted to other species.
Is anybody looking at the differences? That would be a good project.
Yeah, but there's people studying, of course, the sorry, I have it, I'm biased. The entomology side of it, but there are some groups studying, and here, again, what happens in Uruguay, regarding plantations, forest issues, forest health issues, also happen in the nearby regions of Argentina and southern part of Brazil. So we also have collaborations with groups in Brazil and in Argentina. And there was a group in Argentina studying the fungi associated with those beetles. And actually in my institute and also researchers from that mycology lab I was mentioning, there were also some studies aiming to know what symbiotic associations those bark beetles had in Uruguay. Yeah.
Well,
interesting.
Very interesting to be able to talk to you and to do this interview. And
one more thing, how do all these beetles get introduced? Is it through commerce? Do you have introduction of plants for horticulture? Or?
So there's
many ways.
Many ways they can, like with international trade, and the same as the emerald ash borer here, that it's assumed to have entered the country in woodpacking material. That of course all of those woodpacking materials should be treated, and those should have all the I forget the names of those, the rules that say that those packing materials shouldn't be moving.
Part of quarantine.
Yes, but at some point that is not fulfilled or something happens, and maybe that's one of the ways to have some might have entered the country, and we don't strictly know.
It's probably so many different things, and maybe several introductions.
Yeah,
when I'm afraid I have something in packing materials, or sometimes I brought wooden objects back, and at night I can kind of hear noises. And I had that with things I'd brought from Mexico. So what I do is to put them in my car with the windows up in the summer and leave them for a week or so. And it works really well since I don't have a big freezer.
You should try autoclaving
Yeah.
just in case.
But car works fine, and
Okay,
as long as it's small, it wouldn't
Yeah,
work
yeah,
for
yeah.
lots of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Good.
So that's great. Anything else you want to add? Or?
Well, no, I don't know. Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
inviting me
Thank
to
you.
this interview.
We thank him for telling us.
Yeah, sure, I will.
Yeah.